Good afternoon, ladies. It's exciting to be here and exciting to teach God's Word and exciting to see all the faces that are still here at the end of the week. I hope you've had a good week here, and certainly we've learned a lot about wisdom, and hopefully we've grown in knowledge and increased our spiritual strength. My assigned topic this afternoon is the wise woman who saved a city. And I just want to start by actually mentioning a few things that King Solomon said in Ecclesiastes chapter 9. In verse 16, Solomon said that wisdom is better than strength. And in verse 18, he said wisdom is better than weapons of war. Solomon also said, oops, I got ahead of myself already. Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 3:7, that's not on the slide, I messed myself up. Ecclesiastes 3:7, Solomon said there is a time or a season for every purpose, including a time for silence and a time to speak. So I want us to keep that kind of in the back of our mind as we go through this lesson. And think about how speaking the right words at the right time can be more powerful than physical strength. And so I think as we go to the wise woman of 2 Samuel chapter 20, we're going to see this principle. So in 2 Samuel chapter 20, we're jumping into Israel's history at the time where King David is ruling, but he has left the throne for a time because of his son Absalom. And then, of course, there was the death of Absalom, and David returned to the throne in Jerusalem. And at that time, there was a man named Sheba who was a rebel. He was against David, and he did not want David to take the throne. And so David sent, well, first he sent someone else, but we'll get to that later. But Joab was the commander of the army. And Joab was a man of war. He was kind of I kind of picture him as kind of a brute. He was a tough, battle-hardened soldier, and he didn't mind cutting people down. He was a tough guy, and so he was the commander of the army, and he goes after Sheba. Sheba is the son of Bichri. He was the one who was rebelling against David, and so in the beginning of chapter 20, they're after Sheba. And it says that they chased Sheba all throughout Israel. So here's a map for us. And Jerusalem is down near the bottom of that map. And they finally caught up to Sheba. The army catches up to Sheba at the city of Abel, Beth-maachah. And I had to look that up. I did not know that name. But you might be more familiar with the city Dan, which is up near the top. I can't reach that. I don't know why I thought I could reach that. I need a pointer or something, right? But you know where the Sea of Galilee is, the smaller sea there, and just north of that is Dan, which probably, if you've studied any Bible geography, you're probably familiar with that. So Beth-maachah is up in that area, and it lies in kind of a valley, and there's mountain ridges on both sides of that. And I actually found some pictures on the internet, because you can find anything on the internet. Here's a picture that was taken by the Israel Antiquities Authority in 1945. And this is taken from a road down in the valley. The taller part is it's sort of two mounds. And so the taller part is the upper mound. I believe that's to the north, and then it kind of swoops down to a lower mound. And that's where, there's nothing there right now, but that's where it would have been. Here's some more modern pictures from an excavation team in 2016. This particular picture is looking east, and that mountain in the back is Mount Hermon. You might be familiar with that name. And so I think I can reach this part. Right in this area right here, this brown area would be Abel, Beth-maachah. That's Beth-maachah there. And so looking in the other direction, you can see the taller end of the hill there. That's looking back toward modern day Lebanon. That would be looking west. And so that just kind of gives us an idea of the position of that. And when I was looking at that, I thought, in today, that would be a very open, undefendable kind of place there in the open. But because we have bombs. Somebody sits in a little room somewhere on the computer and pushes a button and blows things up. That's how we fight today, right? But back in those days, the army had to go there and, beat down the walls. And so being there in that little rise of a hill in that valley, they had a view, didn't they? They could see somebody coming. And so being in the walled city is a very strong defensive area. But looking back on there's the modern village there on the hill is in Lebanon, which would have been in the Bible Phoenicia. And that would, you're probably familiar with the cities of Tyre and Sidon, would be on over that way toward the coast. So anyway, Joab comes and he's chasing Sheba, and he has run all through the territory of Israel trying to catch him. Now, this would have been considered somewhat of a border town. So if he doesn't get him, he's going to slip over Mount Hermon into Syria, which were their enemies, or he's going to slip over this hill into Phoenicia, and he could go to Tyre and Sidon and get on a ship going anywhere. So he needs to catch him, right? We can understand that from a kind of a strategic point of view. Maybe there's a sense of panic. He's chasing him, and he's got to get him before he gets away. So anyway, he's in the walled city of Abel Beth Maacah, and he's building what was called a siege ramp. This is the only decent picture I could find. This is from the Roman time, which would have been much later, and they didn't have all these extra pieces, but just the part in yellow there would be the ramp. He's trying to build a ramp to get up there, knock down the walls, get in. And I read on the internet Assyrians were very good at that too, very known for that in that time. This was a common warfare back in those days. And the Assyrians would take about 25 days to build a ramp like that. So that gives us kind of I just feel a sense of urgency that Joab and the army have of, we got to get this guy. It's going to take this long to build this ramp. We have to get this done. So I just building in a sense of urgency of what he's trying to do there. So going further down in chapter 20 then enters into our lesson, the wise woman. The wise woman comes along in this building process. And it says that she called out and asked to speak to Joab. It says, say unto Joab, there in verse 16, come near hither that I may speak with thee. Notice she knows who's in charge, doesn't she? She calls out for the man in charge. That's the person to take your complaint to. Who's in charge? Who has authority? In verse 17, she says, hear the words of thy handmaid. And calling herself his handmaid shows a sense of humility, I think. She's not being angry. She's not yelling in a rude sense. She's showing a good attitude and showing herself to be humble. Let's see. In verse 18, she says to him, they were wont to speak in old time, saying they shall surely ask counsel at Abel. So Abel is a name that kind of referred to the general area where Beth Maacah was specifically that walled city, is my understanding. In the commentary of Kyle and DeLeach, they had this to say. Let's see. Abel had formerly been celebrated for the wisdom of its inhabitants. So at one point in time, it was common for people to come to this area to seek wisdom or to ask counsel, to ask advice. So I feel like she's kind of saying to him, people used to come here to ask counsel, so let me give you some advice. But saying it in a nice way to him. So going on to verse 19, the wise woman, she dives straight to the point of her message, and she has just 3 simple things to say to him. She states 2 facts, and then she asks him a leading question. And I just want you to note in this, as we look at this, and we're going to kind of dissect this a little bit, but she does not tell Joab, here's what I want you to do. She's not telling him what to do. This is a very interesting strategy to me. I'm really glad that this was assigned to me, because I don't think I had really studied this very in depth at all, but this is very interesting when we dissect what she has to say here. The first statement she says is that she is peaceable and faithful. I'm peaceable and faithful in Israel. She's quick to let him know, we're not at war with you. We're on your side. You know, they're on the same side. They're Israelites. They're God's people. One commentary suggested that she was indicating to Joab that he should have asked the city's intention before he laid siege to them and started building this ramp. That's an act of war, isn't it? That's aggression. He's being very aggressive in the situation. And she's kind of letting him know, you should have asked. And the commentary pointed out that in Deuteronomy 20, verse 10, according to the Jewish law, the armies of Israel were to proclaim peace to a city and see if it opened up to them before attacking the city. That would be like them attacking like a foreign city, like their enemies. So if that's the way you're supposed to treat your enemies, shouldn't you treat your own people as well or better? That would be logical, right? But he didn't do that. And because I guess he had this sense of urgency, he just came up and laid siege to them and started being very aggressive and attacking them. So that was her first statement. The second statement is, thou seekest to destroy a city and a mother in Israel. Now is a very interesting expression. The part about destroying a city, that's obvious, isn't it? He's going to knock down the walls. Probably people are going to get hurt. The walls and part of the city are going to be destroyed. So that's obvious. But the phrase a mother in Israel, I think, is very interesting there. Again, the commentary of Kyle and DeLeach suggested that this passage may be referring to like a mother city, like it's maybe an important city, like a capital city. And certainly it was in an important location, so that might be true. And if that were the case, then maybe she's warning him, you're about to destroy an important city. However, I found the phrase a mother in Israel also in Judges 5:7 in reference to the judge Deborah. Deborah said of herself that she arose a mother in Israel. So that's a little bit of a different picture, kind of saying that, like, we know Deborah was an important woman, an influential woman. So maybe this wise woman is telling Joab, I'm a woman of influence, so you need to listen to me. Or maybe, there's other possibilities. Maybe she was just saying, she's trying to make an emotional appeal. She's making a common connection with him, trying to appeal to his better self. If Joab had a better self, I'm not sure. But she's trying to make some sort of connection with him here on that. And the Bible doesn't, as far as I could tell, it doesn't tell us exactly what that means, but any of those possibilities fit that circumstance and make sense and shows that she's just trying to make a connection with him on common ground. And her final thought for Joab is posed as a question, and I would call this a leading question at the end there of verse 19. She says, why wilt thou swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? So this final plea is kind of reaffirming, hey, we're on the same side. We're God's people. Why would you destroy the inheritance of the Lord? And so his course of action is going to destroy one of their own cities, an important city, and destroy some of their own people. I think it's interesting to note, as I said, she didn't tell Joab what she wanted to do. There's no, I want you to do this. I think you should do that. Instead, she uses what I would call key persuasive words to lead him to her point of view. She didn't tell him what her point of view was, but she led him to what she wanted. So first of all, she used some positive words. Well, I'm jumping ahead. No, I don't have a slide for that. I'm sorry, I thought I did. Anyway, she uses positive words like peaceable and faithful. Those are good things, right? Making a good, positive, again, the common ground connection, establish common ground. And then she used negative words like destroy and swallow up. Those are negative. So we wouldn't want negative ideas attached to our name, would we? Or our actions. And so she's not, but she's not using negative words to attack Joab personally, which is what we see a lot today. You know, she could have said, "Hey, you big dumb brute, why are you doing this? You're a moron." That's the kind of things people today might say. But calling names and saying things like that, does that solve a problem? All you're doing is making somebody angry, and then they don't want to listen to you. And so she uses negative ideas, but not to attack him personally. I found that very interesting. Anyway, here's Joab's response. In verse 20, he says, far be it from me that I should swallow up or destroy. So he repeats those words, swallow up and destroy. He does not want those negative words attached to him, which is interesting because he was a very brutish guy, and sometimes he did destroy, and sometimes he did swallow up people, didn't he? Just earlier in this chapter, well, I didn't mention it, but on the way there, he had cut somebody down in cold blood in the middle of the road. He came up like a friend and just stabbed him. So he's not afraid to attack people, and he's not afraid to destroy people, but for some reason, he doesn't want this attached to him in this instance. So he says, far be it from me. And then, let's see, in verse 21, then he tells the reasoning for what he's doing. This Sheba has lifted up his hand against the king. And I'm not really sure if they understood that Sheba was hiding in the city. I'm not really sure if they knew that or not, but maybe he should have started with this. There's a guy there named Sheba, and he's rebelling against King David. These people are loyal to King David, so they would not have been in favor of Sheba, would they? So I'm thinking maybe he should have started with that. But anyway, he finally gets around to saying, I'm here to get Sheba. And here's his solution. Wait, that went backwards, didn't it? Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. His solution is to deliver him, and I will depart from the city. So that sounds very reasonable, doesn't it? If they will deliver Sheba, he'll leave. So there'll be no destroying, there'll be no knocking down of walls. That is what the wise woman wanted, isn't it? She wanted him to leave them alone, go away. And so he offers this peaceful solution. So here is her response. Behold, his head shall be thrown to thee over the wall. Okay, that's pretty precise and to the point. We'll get him. That's what we would say, right? We'll get this guy. And it seems to be like an immediate response. She tells him to watch, and his head will be thrown over the wall. Okay. So think about that's a bold statement. Now, how could she say, we'll do this? I'm just wondering, is this woman going to go and attack Sheba and do this herself? Obviously, if it were me, I need some help. I'd say, y'all go do this. This is a good idea. I wouldn't be the one going to do this. And the Bible tells us she went to the people of the city. And, this is one of those instances in the Bible where he's like, what's the rest of the story? What did she say to them? I would like to know that. What did she say to the people to get them to agree? Because this was a solution they want too, right? They want to be left alone. Leave us in peace. We're happy in our walled city. Everything's good. Go away, Joab. That's what they want. So I think we can assume that the way she talked to Joab, which was reasonable and she used the art of persuasion to stop what he was trying to do. So I would assume when she went and talked to the people of her city, she used reason and persuasion to get them to her way of thinking, which obviously worked because the Bible simply says, and they cut off his head and threw it over the wall, and Joab took it and left. So after all this building of the siege ramp and all this, it seemed like a very easy peasy, simple solution, didn't it? But So let's think the rest of the time. I forgot to look at the time and know when am I supposed to stop? I have plenty of time. That's great. Okay, let's talk about wise women today, because we want to be wise women, don't we? We've spent all week learning about wisdom and who is wise. Well, we want to be wise, don't we? And we want to be wise women. Let's see. So what can we learn from? I think that obviously she's an excellent example of how to speak up in a meaningful and an effective way. I think a lot of times as Christians, we will find ourselves, we're on the defense. Someone saying, you Christians do this, and you Christians believe that, and we feel like we're in a defensive position, right? But we want to be wise in the way we're talking to people, and we want to persuade them to our way of thinking, like this wise woman persuaded Joab. So maybe we need to learn to be a little more proactive in taking the word out in a persuasive way. And so I think it would be good if we learn some basic principles of persuasive communication. And that there are two aspects in how to speak up in a meaningful and effective way. And one thing is knowing when to speak up. And the second one is knowing how to speak up. So effective communication would involve mastering both of these. I'm going to stop a second and take a little drink. Sorry about that. My throat gets really dry and it's allergy season and all of that. So, knowing when to speak. Sometimes we find ourselves in a particular situation and we don't know what to say or if we should say something. And we've looked a lot this week at the book of Proverbs, right? Because that is it's like a treasure chest of wisdom. And I just enjoy reading it and studying it over and over and trying to glean more treasures from that to help in our everyday lives. And so we can find some verses in Proverbs to help us know how to relate and communicate with other people. And so let's look at a few, there's a lot, but we'll just look at a few. Proverbs 10:19 says, "He that refraineth his lips is wise." So to be wise in communicating, first of all, refrain your lips. That seems a little counterintuitive, or like I'm saying the opposite, but knowing when not to speak, knowing to keep our mouths shut, or when we should speak up, being in control of our mouths, in control of what we're saying. This is something that we should always be working on, but it's hard to perfect, isn't it? I don't think we ever reach a point of perfection, especially on this, because there's just always those times when you say something and you think, oh, I should not have said that. But you put it out there and it's too late to take it back, isn't it? So refrain your lips. Thinking before you speak is what we say sometimes. Here's another verse. Proverbs 15:23, "A word spoken in due season, how good it is." Words that are spoken at just the right time can bring joy and comfort to the people who hear, but it also brings joy and comfort to us, doesn't it? Sometimes when you go to encourage someone and build them up, and do you come away feeling better yourself? You encouraged yourself by doing that. So a word fitly spoken, spoken at the due season, at the right time, it's a good thing. It's a comforting thing. It's a joy. But sometimes people say what's true and they're right words, but maybe they say it at the wrong time. The timing is bad, and the hearer is not in the right frame of mind, and they don't receive those words well. Sometimes we have to be a discerner of saying something at the right time. Let's see. As I was thinking about this, well, sometimes you say the right thing at the wrong time, it's counted as the wrong thing, isn't it? Even if you're right, people count it as you're being mean or you've said something wrong. And I was thinking of a couple examples. One is imagine you're walking into a party or a large fellowship hall, and you're walking in with a friend or sister or whoever, and she looks at you and says, "Your dress looks terrible. That color looks horrible on you." Just as you're walking in, are you going to receive that well? You're going to feel bad, right? Like, "Oh, I wish I could run home and change this," but now you've got to step in front of everybody. But that wouldn't be received well. That it might be the right thing, but that's not a good time to hear those words, is it? Another thing, another example that I thought of, and this is true. The first one I made up because I think that would be bad to me. But this is a true example. Many years ago, we were at a congregation, and I guess on the Lord's Day, and during the invitation song, one of the older ladies of the congregation, I saw her kind of step out in the aisle and start forward. And I thought, oh, someone's coming forward. But she just went a few pews forward and stepped in. And there was a family there with a teenage girl on the end, and she put her arm around her. And I thought, okay, that's a little awkward, but that's sweet. She's being sweet to this girl. She was trying to get her to come forward. And I thought, wow, that's really awkward. I just tried to imagine how I would feel if I were that teenage girl. Very awkward. I felt, as they say, secondhand embarrassment, I guess. It felt a little cringy. I think she created, it was good that she was interested in the girl's soul, but there's a better way to express that, isn't there? She could have invited her to lunch or talked to her after the service and saying, I'm concerned about you and I care about you, and positive things like that lead somebody in the right direction, not trying to pull them forward during the invitation song. And, it's kind of like up front and everybody can see it. That's really awkward. And I think that pushes people away. So there's an example of the right thing at the wrong time. So let's speak words that are fitly spoken in due season. That's a talent we need to learn. So let's go on to another passage here. Proverbs 31 verses 8 and 9 says to open your mouth for the dumb and plead the cause of the poor and needy. And others are mentioned there. In other words, here are some people that we should speak for, on behalf of. Like, those who are able to speak should speak for those who can't speak for themselves. Like I know in the cases of like young children in court, sometimes they appoint somebody to speak for them because they're not old enough to speak for themselves or know what's best for themselves. So someone gets appointed to speak for them. So we should be willing to speak for people who can't speak for themselves. Or, maybe you're with a group of people and they're saying not so nice things about somebody, but that's a nice person. So is it good to speak up for that person and say, oh no, she's really nice, or this person has really helped me out. This is a good guy, or something like that. That's speaking up for somebody who maybe could speak for themselves, but they're not there at that time. So you're kind of speaking up for other people. That's when we should speak up. So let's talk about, some times when we should not speak. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 30 says, strive not with a man without a cause. Some people just like to argue, and they don't even have a reason to argue. They just enjoy the argument, I guess. But those are not words fitly spoken, are they? We shouldn't want to argue just for the sake of arguing. Sometimes we might use the expression, don't kick a hornet's nest, because what's going to happen if you kick a hornet's nest. You're the one who's going to be stung, aren't you? And it's going to be a problem. So just walk away and leave that alone. Here's another verse that's closely related to that. Proverbs 26 verse 17 says, he that passeth by and meddleth with a strife, belonging not to him, is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. So you're just going along and somebody's having a problem, an argument or whatever. It has nothing to do with you. But some people will just jump right into the middle of that, wouldn't they? again, that's the person who likes strife, who likes to argue. So jumping into other people's arguments can actually be dangerous and backfire on you, because a lot of times they will both turn against you because you jumped into the middle. And it doesn't matter whose side you were on, they're suddenly both against you, and you're not in a good position then. So don't jump into a strife that belongs not to you. That's when not to speak. Just walk on by. Let's see. Well, here's some. I went to the internet because that's the source of all information these days. And I just did a search on how and when to speak up. We know what's the modern day advice. And so, of course, there's everything under the sun, but there is some good advice, because people today talk a lot about speaking up, don't they? Okay, so here's my advice I found from the internet. One person said, say something if you would later regret not saying something. If you see something that needs to be said, and later you would regret it, then say something. Some of the ladies and I were talking earlier this week about, and this is something that I've seen too. There was a elderly lady who went to the restroom during the middle of the sermon, and when she came back, her skirt wasn't quite right. And then some of you may have seen some. In the front, it looked fine, but the back was stuck in the layers. And so my husband was preaching at that time, and he saw her come in, and she looked normal, and he didn't think anything about it. But there was an usher at the back who opened and closed the door, and he was like, all of a sudden when she went by, and he was scrambling around trying to, I don't know what he did to help her, or he got one of the ladies to help her, I'm not sure. And so after that, we always, you do the little swishy with your skirt as you stand up after you've been sitting, or you've coming out of the restroom. We check these things because, we want to know. So, if you saw somebody in a situation like that, and you just stand there and go, oh, look at that. And then they go on, they're going to embarrass themselves, right? Sometimes it's that little string of toilet paper is stuck on your shoes or something like that. If you're in an embarrassing situation, you want somebody to say something and help you out so you don't further embarrass yourself. So, we would return the favor. And if you see somebody having a problem, an issue like that, say, excuse me, and help them correct that before they embarrass themselves. So I think that's a situation where, you would feel bad if you didn't say something. So their advice is to say something if you would later regret not saying it. Or say something if you know you can improve someone's situation. You may have a particular piece of information or knowledge that can help somebody out. And it'd be good to pass that on, right? Help people when you can help make their situation better. Let's see, here's another one. One person said, ask yourself some questions. And here's one of the questions: is the timing right to say something? I think that goes back to the lady talking to the teenage girl during the invitation song. It's the right thing, but not at the right time. Do you personally play a role in the situation? Sometimes people just want to jump into everything and give their advice to everything. But, if you're not playing a personal role in the situation, maybe your advice isn't needed, especially if you don't have a particular piece of information that they need. Can you meaningfully influence the issue? Okay, so are you adding information to an argument or a problem? Are you adding information that makes it better, you can make a meaningful difference? Or are you just adding extra information? So going back to the wise woman, let's think about when she spoke up, what she did. She was at the right place at the right time. And she had a personal role in the situation because she was in a city about to be destroyed. She could have been killed. Her family members, neighbors, friends, they were in physical danger, weren't they? And so she had a personal role in that, and she could make a meaningful contribution. And so I think we would have to say that she chose the right time to speak up. So let's go then and talk about how to speak. So now when we understand when we should speak, maybe when we should not speak. So if you're in a situation, you decide now's the time I need to say something, then how do you say it? How do you speak up? So let's go back to the Bible and Proverbs. Proverbs 10:14 says, wise men lay up knowledge. So we've talked all week about who is wise and how to be wise. And one way is to lay up knowledge. So you're building that knowledge so that when you need it, it's there, right? And something closely related is Proverbs 15 verse 2, the tongue of the wise useth knowledge aright, but the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. So the wise person stores up knowledge and then uses that knowledge the right way. So, and how do we use knowledge the right way? We deal with it truthfully, don't we? Sometimes people take, and this would be the foolish person, they take a little bit of knowledge and they twist it into just something really stupid and they think they're really smart because they have this little bit of knowledge. But as you store up knowledge, you keep adding to knowledge and you use it the right way. And so that's the using knowledge aright. Let me see where I am in my notes. I forget, lose my place. Let's look at another verse here, which is right there in the same opening. Proverbs 15 verse 1, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. We've all heard that. I'm sure we've all heard that before. And that is just one of the best pieces of advice, isn't it? A soft answer turns away wrath, because grievous words, that's yelling at somebody in anger, calling them, you're stupid, you big dumb brute, what are you doing? Those are grievous words, and they just make people angry. And it's like, as we say, pouring fuel on the fire. That doesn't make a better situation. It makes things worse. And so the soft answer is the way to turn away wrath. Okay, Proverbs 29:8 says that wise men turn away wrath. So a wise woman will speak in such a way to give a soft answer to turn away wrath. Let's see another verse here. Proverbs 29:11, a fool uttereth all his mind, but a wise man keepeth it in till afterwards. Okay, a fool is a person uttering, or sometimes we say venting. I'm venting. I'm saying everything that's on my mind. We probably all know somebody, and you think every thought they have comes right out their mouth. I think everybody knows somebody like that. And I think that's especially true of children. They say everything they think. But as we get older and wiser, we learn not to do that. We should not say everything that we think, but keep some in, keep something back, keep the foolish things back, and say the wise things, right? Let's see. There are some things we just need to keep to ourselves, right? Let's see. There's other passages. We have stayed mostly in Proverbs for advice, but going to some other passages outside of Proverbs, Psalm 145 verse 8 says, the Lord is gracious and full of compassion, slow to anger, and of great mercy. So here's some qualities of our Heavenly Father, and we should be trying to imitate the qualities and learn and develop the qualities of our Heavenly Father, being gracious, being full of compassion, and slow to anger. When we're slow to anger, we hold back those angry words, don't we? And when we take the time to think to say wise things and say helpful things. And so this is a characteristic of God, and we should be learning that as well. Here is another in Hebrews 5:2. This is talking about Christ. It says that he can have compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray. And that's particular wording is from the New King James Version there. But Jesus can have compassion on people who are ignorant and going astray. He doesn't say, "You great big Dumbo." He says he doesn't say you're an idiot or stupid or any of those. Those are just angry words that stir up anger. But Jesus has compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray, and so we should as well. And so name calling is not something that Christians should do, is it? Let's see. So there's other passages here. 1 Peter 3:8 tells us as Christians that we should have compassion one of another, love as brethren, be pitiful, which is kind-hearted, be courteous. So there's not room there in that verse for angry words and name-calling and things like that, is there? When you have compassion, when you love one another, when you're kind-hearted toward one another and courteous, you're courteous in the way you speak, aren't you? In Philippians 2, verse 3 says, "In lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves." When we esteem others better than ourselves, then we treat each other the right way. We don't want to be called rude names, and so we shouldn't call other people rude names. We treat other people the way we want to be treated. So all of these attributes help us to have the right attitude when speaking with other people. And that's the key, isn't it? What is our attitude in our mind? If we have the right attitude in our mind, that's going to come out of our mouths. If we have compassion and we're kind-hearted, that's going to show in what we say. But if we're angry, that's going to show in what we say as well. So when the time is right for us to speak up, having the right attitude is one of the most important things. And so there's the advice from the scriptures. And so let's look again at what the internet had to say. Oh, no, I said that. Never mind. Advice from the internet. I'm looking at too many things up here. One piece of advice said to say what you need to say with love, not angry, defensive, stressed, or harsh. I was kind of surprised to find that in the modern day. When we think about people speaking up, we think about angry people yelling, mean things and rude things. But even people of the world can see that when we speak up, we need to speak up with love and say what we need to say with love and compassion and not anger and not rude, not harsh. So here's another piece of advice says, don't let your feelings override a rational approach. Rational is more effective. That's interesting. Don't let your emotions get the best of you. Again, I guess that's angry words. We let our anger get the best of us and run away with us in the wrong direction. But if we don't let our feelings rule over us, then we can be calm and rational. And the modern day experts say that's more effective. And that's the key to the whole thing, isn't it? When you want to speak up and say something, you want to be effective. You want to influence somebody for the good, to do the right thing, assuming that you're wanting them to do the right thing, but that's what we're talking about. So being rational is more effective. Here's another one. Show people you care and give them a reason to trust you. Now that makes good sense, doesn't it? If people know you care about them, they're more likely to listen to you. If you're just some rude stranger, if a rude stranger says something to you, I think, why do I care what she thinks, and walk away. Hopefully you don't think about that anymore. But when you know people care about you and you trust them, you're more likely to listen to what they have to say. Here is another quote. The art of persuasion is about using a sophisticated mix of communication skills and leadership abilities to bring others around to your ideas after and only after you've convinced them that it's in their best interest. So we're talking about speaking up effectively and using the skill of persuasion. So if we study about persuasive speaking and a persuasive approach, we're learning how to speak up more effectively and get that favorable income. So let's go back again and look at our wise woman in 2 Samuel chapter 20. Let's see how her words stack up to what we've talked about here. The wise woman did not stir up anger. She was not irrational. She made a connection with Joab on a common ground. You know, we're faithful. We're both Israelites. We're all faithful to King David. She made that connection with him and just calmly stated the facts. Sometimes when we're upset, we're like yelling, aren't we? We get a little louder, little louder, little louder until we're just really yelling. And sometimes when we're just emotional about something, maybe we're not even angry, but it comes out kind of like we're yelling. So this lady, this wise woman, calmly stated the facts. And so I think, again, we have to say that she chose the right way to speak up. So let's see. I said she didn't stir up anger. So I was wondering if these modern day people giving advice, I wonder what they would think if they read this passage of this wise woman from 2 Samuel. I wonder if they would think, I've got 1 minute. Oh, good. Thank you. I'm terrible with time. The wise woman, I wonder what they would think, the experts today, if they looked at what she said, because I'm really impressed after I have dug into this and dissected bit by bit what she had to say. I'm very impressed with the way she calmly stated these facts. She made this connection. She never said, Joab, do this. Joab, you're an idiot. She could have said those things, but she didn't. And so I'm just so impressed that she spoke up in such an effective, meaningful way. So when we think about speaking up for a person or a cause, or speaking up, the most important thing we can speak up for is the gospel, isn't it? And so we want to tell our neighbors, our coworkers, whoever, let's think about how to approach them in a persuasive way and use this wisdom from this wise woman. Thank you.